Good morning. It's time to wake up and smell the coffee. I tried doing this like 3 times in the car this morning and it just wouldn't work. So I had to pray over my technology. Very good prayer. I'll be glad to forward it to anybody that's interested. There is a war over our technology. That's a given. And so I was just like, okay, what's the deal here? So I'll jump right in and make it short. So as I was getting up this morning, my whole routine got reversed. Didn't have my coffee, couldn't hey, good morning, Melissa. I couldn't say, wake up and smell the coffee yet because I didn't have it. So my whole routine was reversed. And I thought, okay, Lord, excellent. As prophetic people, not everything we do is prophetic, but on a level, almost everything we do is prophetic. The things you're feeling deeply, the things that are inside of you. My rule about that one is, good morning, Jamie. When what's inside of me is larger than what a circumstance calls for, whether it be anxiety, anger, or whatever it is, or just frustration, it usually means that it's something that's going on beyond me. It's larger than me. And so learning to trust was kind of in us prophetically. And so when I was, getting ready this morning, everything got reversed, so nothing was working. So I just said, well, I'm going to try it again one more time. And I prayed over my technology, and I was like, okay, here we go. Everything's about to get reversed. That can be. And everything is about to get undone. I started by talking about Kouzes and Posner. Many years ago in my first graduate program or second graduate program, I was working on my master's in education, and I was reading this book called The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. Well, I never got past the introduction. All the rest of it, the stuff on the inside, was stuff I'd heard a million different times about leadership, yada, yada, yada. And nobody likes to really talk about servant leadership in those kind of books. But what he said was that technology became the great leveler. In other words, it leveled the playing field. In corporate and other kinds of hierarchical structures, knowledge became the new currency, and what you could do with that knowledge and that data and information became your calling card. So you became as good as your last gig, your last set of skills, and the technology that you've employed along the way. But he was talking about how corporate structures got leveled, because no more was it the guy at the top that had everything. It was the guys at the bottom that had access to the same information that they did. So then it became what you actually did with what you had that could move you up or down or laterally, whatever direction, but it was that. And I was remembering that this morning because I love that introduction. And it was like, because the structures of the world are crumbling, okay? Jesus is crumbling hierarchies, and it's religion, it's all of it. So we are being liberated as an ecclesia to be manifest sons and daughters of God. And where we carry it, it's a shift in our identity, it's a shift in how we see revival, it's a shift in all those things. And COVID was the great, discombobulator, because essentially what COVID did, or what Jesus did in COVID, was in the disorientation and the discombobulation, people had to find a new way to make something work. Everybody went back to the drawing board, and people learned, if I don't have a virtual presence, we don't exist. We learned if we can't get a product to people in more than one way, we don't exist. And so essentially, it became the breeding ground for one of the greatest entrepreneurial curves that's going to ever hit the earth. And that's the seedbed of what's coming out of what the enemy did in COVID. Is going to create an explosion in the kingdom of entrepreneurial ways to do things and ways of doing what we do that are so different and outside the box than what we've ever done before. And for most of us, it's because we got untethered from everything familiar. That's what Jesus does. He doesn't bring the discombobulation or the disorientation, but he uses it to reformat the heart and to prepare it for something that we haven't been able to do ourselves. So I was getting ready to go in the shower, and I heard the word Position to Bless, which is actually this book by Fazil Malik, and I won't say his name right. If you haven't read it, it's phenomenal. You know how like when you go back to something, like yesterday, the Lord spoke to me and I posted about it. He spoke to me about this song by Jeremy Riddle. It's gonna get stronger. And I was like, okay. I went straight to the song. I knew the song, but I didn't know, I knew the chorus. I didn't know the lyrics, the main part. And so when I read it, I realized it was like, oh, prophetically, he was saying something really huge. So it's kind of like that for me. Like I could have read this 3 years ago and we've all been prophesying out of the places where we are. And then you come back to something and you're like, oh my God, I'm prophesying something that this man was talking about too. But he was talking about it in 2008. So anyway, I want to read a little piece of what he says, and he starts with Psalm 139 at the very beginning. And it's the part where the book of life, he says, before I was born and made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before any one of them came to be. Most of us know, the name of the book, here you go, Jamie. It's called Position to Bless. Probably shows up backwards there, but I'll take a picture and post it in the group. If everything about who you and I were was conceived in Jesus before we were conceived in a parent, your destiny and the conversation that heaven had about you happened before you were born. How into the creation and the playing out of your destiny do you think Jesus is into? The thing that's given me comfort is he's into it more than I am, which means I can't really screw it up. I can't really, mess it up. And a lot of times that's our fear, because if we've been through multiple thresholds, right, where we watched things blow up, we came to that place where we thought we were going to have delivery, and we watched it blow up, and we got sidetracked and detoured and all kind of stuff. There's a temptation to think that that's the pattern that we're going to do for the rest of our life. And it's not. I know for me that that one of the things that I have found in this that does give me great comfort is that he really is into it more than I am. And I need to always remember that, because, one of my biggest griefs has always been over lost time. Okay. I would bemoan the years, if I would have gotten saved before I went to college, if I would have spent all those years in education, if I would have been stepping into my calling as a revivalist and whatever, I've been on this backside of the desert and this realm in one of the mountains of the culture, but it doesn't have a lot to do with the thing that's burning inside of me as far as a generation, as a revivalist and prophetic person, whatever. And so I would bemoan the lost years of destruction. The things that happened in the context of a bad divorce, what the things, I married the love of my life 23 years ago, but prior to that, it was like I lost a lot of ground because of divorce, and I had to watch what happened to my kids. I had to, as a father, I became suddenly a visitor instead of somebody who was in the home. And according to the court, I was just a visitor. And things happened that I never could imagine happening in my life. And so I always live with this perpetual sense of regret. Here's what redemption looks like. No matter what path you've been on, and no matter how far you think you've been detoured, redemption is when Jesus redeems time and you end up in the very place that you were created for, to do the thing you were created for, no matter what. In other words, no matter what path you think you took that side-railed you, etc., here's the cure for the grief over lost time. Knowing that Jesus redeems time, and knowing that he's been into the process more than you have, and nothing has caught him off guard. So therefore, comma, as he brings us into the very thing that we were created for, we are always right on time. The enemy plays with my shame, and the enemy plays with my sense of loss, and the enemy wants to tell me it's too late for you. It's just too late for you. Look at you. You're this old. I'm 57 years old, and what do you think you're going to do? Some of us we're mothers and fathers in the faith. We've been around for a while, and we're late bloomers, okay? Because we've been in a place where, for me, that backside of the desert has been education in many ways. And this room I've been in for 15 years now, and I haven't left the four walls of it. And I'm somebody who's created, and the things I did before this, to move, shake, entrepreneurial, build, plant, uproot, that's who I'm geared. But we've been locked in prisons. And I want to say this about it. There's an appointed time for everybody to emerge and for everybody to take their seat of authority. And when you're in that seat of authority, that's why I love the word of Nate's. He's been reading my mail for years. But the one about the eagle's nest is so, so right, because the issue isn't that I'm dysfunctional and I've missed it and there's something so wrong with me that I can't ever get there. The issue is appointed times, appointed places, appointed people. And when we're in those places, right now it feels like God's doing nothing, but he's actually positioning. And when we are with the people in the location and the time that he has ordained, there are some things that could not be unlocked until appointed time. And the landscape of our heart has been prepared for this time. All of this has been preparation, and nothing is wasted. That's what helps me deal with this sense of grief over loss. When Jesus says, look, you may not have been in the thing you were called to. You may have been operating in a part of what you were called to. You may have been devastated for 10 years and taken out and been through multiple fires, and your track record is messy as all get out. Jesus is not evaluating how messy our journey was to come to this place, or how many places we thought we failed, blew it up, etc. He wants to deliver us from the shame and the guilt that we've carried. He's going after. Look at the baptism revival that is taking place in this country. Okay, North Georgia. I've been there. I've taken kids there, watched them get healed of all kind of things. My wife got healed the first time of, at that time, probably stage 3 breast cancer in those waters in North Georgia revival. What has the revival focused on? The heart. People came into that water and they didn't care so much about what they were going to get from God. They just wanted God. It was all about the restoration of the heart. It's all about the restoration of the heart. And so I want more of you. I want to live in that place of manifest glory with you, Lord. I want more. I'm desperate, right? It's always about the issues of the heart. So when I look at my history, I recognize that Jesus has been working in the soil of my heart, and that I have the privilege now to come in as an 11th hour worker. The guys that came in at 11:59 got paid the same as the ones. The only difference is there is a culmination and a convergence of every age of this church that is manifesting in a kairos moment, an explosion that will carry us to the very end. There's never been a greater time to be alive. We were made for such a time as this. But the thing the enemy has done to knock prophetic people out is to play on all of our past failures and all of our lost time to tell us it's too late. Look at you. This is how old you are. Yada, yada, yada. Look, the golden years are coming, and the latter glory of the house will be greater than the former. And who's the house? You. You're the house. The latter glory of the house will be greater than the former glory, which means that condensing of time, the event time, is about to accelerate, and Jesus is going to shove into a year what would take 10. And so that when he redeems it, because part of my thing has always been, how do you redeem? these lost years of relationships with kids because of divorce, or the way that it's not that I've had none, it's just that it's been so painful because of all the things that come into it. How do you redeem the years I feel like I wasted not moving in the thing I was called to? How do you redeem the years that we cried out for revival and cried out for supernatural manifestation, and we contended from disappointment forever? How do you redeem that? You redeem it by making that which is coming richer and deeper and more profound than anything we've ever experienced. The place is trusting in the person of Jesus and knowing that redeeming time doesn't look like, it's not linear like we are. I don't lose 10 years and get 10 years. I lose 10 years and I get 100 condensed into 10, into 1, into a month. It's when he takes the time that's left. The way he spoke to me one time, he said, the deck of cards is stacked in the end. They're stacked. The cards are stacked, which means that's why it's going to be suddenly, because not to Jesus, but to us, because we don't always have the perspective about that we're coming into that condensed time, redeemed time season, where everything is going to take place in a greater magnitude and a greater depth than what we've ever known, so that we literally forget about the thing that was so painful in our history, where the joy and the excitement of being a part of this whole thing is so much greater than anything we could have ever experienced, when the relationships flourish, when things break open. And so here's what this guy says. I want to read this one part and I'll kind of end here. He says, have you ever had a cry? This is what was getting me when I opened this morning. Have you ever had a cry in your heart, a desire from God to see certain things come to pass, but year after year, nothing seems to happen? If you're in that place, raise your hand. Right. I used to make fun of that song, that Bethel song that I love, He's in the Waiting. I'd be like, my little sarcastic, little jaded self would be like, in the waiting, right? You're in the waiting. Oh, you're definitely in the waiting. All right. But have you ever felt distant for greater things, but remained stuck in a powerless place? I want to say this. You have not been held back from the thing that you were created for because you spent years doing something different. You were actually being hidden. Holy Spirit has hidden some of the greatest treasures that are going to be released on the earth and kept you in a place where even though you blew up 100 times and got annihilated because that's who you were, most of us that have anything prophetic about our lives, this isn't the first time we felt rejection. It started in the womb. We had very interesting births. We had years of our lives where we knew we were different. We never fit into anything. We got blown up in systems. We got annihilated here and annihilated there because the very constitution of who we were, Jeremiah 1, as people who were made to break open, to shake the earth, to change atmospheres, to wreck religious systems, the very essence of who we were was always in conflict and contradiction to the system of mammon in the world. So we always felt like we were out of sync. We always felt like there was something wrong with us. The difference is, Jesus doesn't want us to step into the shame and agree with the enemy that there's something about you defective. What he's saying in all this, when he says, before I knew you in the womb, formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I ordained you as a prophet to the nations. When he says that, what he's saying is, you're not defective. You're exactly the way I made you. I used to hate the way I was wired. I used to curse the way I was wired. Why do you feel everything? Why are you wired in a way that gets you rejected? Why are you wired in a way where people are threatened by you all the time and you're not even doing anything to try to be a threat? I used to bemoan a lot of those things, and I can't say that I don't have days where I do. I do. But it's more about what's right about you than what's wrong. And you have been preserved for such a time as this. And because you've been involved in things that haven't been the thing you really feel like you were made for yet, doesn't mean it's not, we're not at that precipice right now, because we are. And the biggest battles are at every threshold, every major transition. Is what Nate was saying yesterday, the anxiety and everything we feel, the part where we feel the most discombobulated, the most disconnected, the most just out of it, are the places where we're actually standing at that. We really are coming into the place where now means now. Look at Ezekiel 12. It talks about the proverb. It was like, delay, delay, delay. And the Lord says, never, not anymore. It's not going to be about that anymore. It's going to be about now. I'm going to issue a decree and fulfill it now. Many of us are going to see things manifest because we are walking in a place of third heaven revelation. We don't want religion anymore. We're done with that. We want to live, move, and have our being in an unscripted life and move in the Holy Spirit. And that's what he has freed us to do. That's part of what COVID did. He had to untether us from everything that held us so that we could actually be free to move. And so he says in this book, have you ever felt destined for greater things but remain feeling stuck and powerless in a powerless place? Has it ever appeared as though what God said to you was about to happen when suddenly it was swept away from your grasp? It might not seem like it now, but you are being strategically positioned in the Spirit. You may move from one place to the next geographically, or you may live in the same small town your whole life. But that will not affect the authority that God has given you to impact the world. He has prepared a strategic location or region for you individually and others God connects. This is the eagle's nest that Nate talks about. If you'll hear his voice, he'll bring you out of any dark place you find yourself in and empower you to take the throne of influence he's designated for you. When Jesus in Luke 4:18 stood up and quoted Isaiah and said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and it goes on to talk about what all of that means, he sat down after he said that, after he said, this has been fulfilled in your midst. And he sat down in what I believe there was a seat called the Messiah seat in the synagogue. And he sat in that seat. If you remember, they wanted to ditch him and throw him over the edge of a cliff after that, because he more or less said, I am he. And then he sat in the seat that was reserved for him. And from that seat, from that place, all of the kingdom authority that he had was going to change everything about who he was, what he did, and where he was going, and it's everything about his earthly ministry. In the same way, when we are seated in our seat of authority, you could say it another way. When I come into the place that I was made for, when I'm in the right place with the right people at this appointed time, that's when the favor breaks open on steroids. That's when the doors fly wide open. There is a place that we are protected, like that eagle's word that Nate talks about, where the canopy of protection of being gathered corporately in the right place at the right time with the right people that God has assigned us to, that there is a protection and there is an explosion of breakthrough that takes place because we are seated in the place of our authority. What else does that mean? Every place that you've had a modicum of success, where you functioned in part of your gifting, right? But not done the thing you were made for, because that place has been reserved for an appointed time, which is now. And when we're seated in the place of our authority, all of heaven converges and comes together in a way that makes everything, it makes all those things we prayed for, all those things we prophetically have been spoken to about. It is the convergence of every season and era of the church into this one era as a continuous, present, continuous Kairos moment that you and I were made for. That's what you're stepping into. That's why the wait has been what it's been, because the landscape that he's preparing you for is so much greater than the one that you thought was the landscape in every previous season. This is not a promotion. This isn't like, we're getting to the next promotion. We're getting to a whole new landscape where everything is new. And so the preparation for that, whether you've been on the backside of the desert or in a career that's been something that doesn't connect fully to the thing you were made for, I want to submit to you that that's because you were hidden. I had I'll end with this. I had a vision one time where I saw this man coming out of a underground, it was like a scene from Lost, you know. It was like there's this underground thing that had a lid in this metal kind of entombed chamber, and I saw the man walking up the stairs. So think about being down under the earth and coming up the stairs. And I mean, not to make this weird, but he was naked, meaning he had nothing. It was just him, which I think is prophetic and symbolic. And the vision wasn't focused on that part. It was focused on what happened. But anyway, he's climbing the stairs. And I'm watching in the vision this man climb the stairs. You know, this naked, scrawny, dirty man he looks emaciated, who, you know, whatever. It looks like he's been like in a cave, like Gollum for 1,000 years. Well, again, hence the cave. And he's coming out and he flips the top of the lid open and he stands up. And then when he stands up outside, I realized in that moment that I was the man. I was looking at a man that I didn't think was me. I thought, who is this, you know, whatever. It's like, oh gosh, it was me. And the Lord said, when I threw open the hatch and came up, he said, now you'll be seen. We're coming out of hiding and we're coming into a place where we're going to be seen, because for many of us, we feel like, I have felt like this for years. Why doesn't my gift make room for me? Why doesn't anything open up? Why do I feel like heaven's not seeing me? Why do I watch everybody go ahead of me? Why do I watch people step into the thing that they're made for? Why I prophesied it into that place and I get to watch them do it. But Lord, what about me? Anybody ever felt that one? Raise your hand. Yeah. Right. It's not because you're defective. It's because there's an appointed time for everything. And there are things that can only be birthed. Your heart and my heart could not conceive the multiple births and assignments that are inside of us in any previous era of our own lives. Because the landscape of the heart, the condition of the soil, he's been working in that soil of our heart. And there are things that have been dormant in the soil, prophetic seed in my heart that had a birthing moment. It was time stamped. And so when it was time, it births. That's why it's going to be so radically different and so radically, it's going to be like dominoes with the suddenlies, because there's a backlog. Everything you've lost relationally, physically, financially, and health and otherwise, this backlog is going to get pulled into a current moment of restoration, a kairos moment of restoration, where it's going to be huge. The landscape is so much bigger than what you ever thought. And the preparation, even the being hidden, we've been hidden, and we've been hidden. But it is time that the hatch opens up and we come out. And the Lord says, now you will be seen. And when you are seen, it'll be in the natural and in the heavens. You've always been seen in heaven, always. And the enemy has shuddered. He doesn't want to see the emerging sons, manifest sons and daughters. He is fighting this. He doesn't know everything about you, but he knows enough to know that there's something that's on you that's bigger than what he can even imagine, and that you are a major threat. Hence the war. Hence the repeated places that were anticlimactic, when you got to the thing where you thought, now I've got something, now this is going to happen, and it doesn't. The enemy wanted to take you out through unbelief and through heart of disappointment and hope deferred. I remember it was one church I was in. I would get up every Sunday and we would have communion, and I would have a short word, and it was always just people. I remember somebody come up to me saying, "Your words have so much hope in them." I'm thinking, really? Because I just had a really crappy weekend, and I've been contending for disappointment for years. And then somebody years later said, "It's because your war is with your mouth. That's how you fight." So I would come out of this place and I would speak something that was bringing encouraging to me and others all at the same time. And it was just like, it's because we as prophetic people fight with our mouth. When you shut your mouth, whether it's in your pen or in your mouth, you die. And I would have friends say, I had a series where I had 100 and some odd revival talks. And then I'd go off grid for a while and go off grid for a while, and it would be like, the off grid times were the times where the enemy had me convinced that what I was doing didn't matter, and that it wasn't going to lead anywhere, and that my gifting was never going to make room for me, and that everybody else was going to go before me, yada, yada, yada. Anybody relate? He would shut me down internally, because the biggest battle is the internal one. So I'll end with this. This guy says the earth is undergoing a major shift, a season of dramatic change. This is a new move of the Spirit involving vast transfers of power. God is repositioning his people in all spheres of leadership. He is in the process of replacing certain positions that have been held by unholy forces with his instruments of righteous authority. When the enemy comes in like a flood, when you're living in the era of lawlessness and love grown cold, a righteous standard gets raised. He is infusing righteousness into the earth and raising up out of sleep and out of hiddenness those having been sent ones, manifest sons and daughters. That's you and me. He says, when that transfer takes place, there will be a dramatic shift in the power structure and a noticeable change in the atmosphere. We're a generation of atmosphere changers as prophetic people. We walk into cities. I often have this thought, if you could just pull my head off for a minute, you would see light just exploding, right? If you could see what happened when you walked into the room, the way I've likened it to, it'd be like billows of fragrance and smoke begin to go out from you. And it's changing everything around you. Whose life got changed because you showed up to the grocery store? Whose life was changed because you just showed up? 99.9% of this whole thing is just showing up. And the enemy wants you to not show up. If you will show up and when you will use your voice, we are there at the precipice. And this is not like any former devastation you've been through. I don't care how many of your triggers are being tripped, your trauma buttons are being pushed, all of those things. Jesus is he's setting up scenarios for many of us where it feels like we're going down like a ship, like sinking, right? Some things feel familiar, but the Lord is saying, this is not that. Scott, this is not that. You might be feeling the squeeze. You might be feeling like you're like this, and this is happening, and you got the biggest battles. This is not that. Sometimes we get led or we go through places that feel like former devastations because the enemy uses the place of familiarity to tether us to shame and to get us to agree with him that this is it, you're done. I'm telling you, this is not the end, this is the beginning. And it is a beginning that is an explosion that will continue until Jesus returns, period. I don't care how dark it gets. You and I are manifest sons and daughters who carry manifestations of glory, and we will release that in the earth till the end. We are the place where solutions come from. We are the ones with the heavenly maps and blueprints. This is a change and power shift that is huge, and we're seeing that. We're going to see huge power shifts, financial shifts, everything. This is you coming into your seat and being seated. And when you're seated in your place of authority, the place that you're made for, the part of the kingdom that you have been given, the co-authorship with Holy Spirit to rule and to reign in, and to develop, and plant, to pluck up, tear down, etc. When you're there, which is where you are now, and we're coming into it, even if you don't see it, everything comes together in ways that you could have never imagined. Blessings. I love the dialogue. I would love to hear what y'all think, and just I welcome the dialogue further. So Jesus, I thank you that we're seated. I release over us. I ask that you would take the chapters of the book of life that are coming up, and like Mary, who called into now something that was for a future time when she asked her son to make the wine, to create the wine, that we would pull something from the future into now, and that you would download those destiny chapters in our heart, and that those chapters would bust open wide inside of us, and hope would flourish, new vision, new everything. This is a time where your vision is going to get really clear. And things that are being birthed in you that are made for this appointed time, I'm asking that they would be like what Jeremiah says, like a fire inside of me. Let your words and your promises be like a fire inside of me that's going to explode out of me, and that I must say something with. I have to use my mouth, Lord. I'm just asking that your fire, even now, that as we're doing this right this moment, I'm asking that the fire of God would hit people, and that and anyone who listens to this later, that you would feel fire burning through your core right now as the Lord affirms his word to you. Blessings.